Great political economists, the greatest of them, Adam Smith, have shown how a market economy, by devolving the power of consumer choice to customers, runs with the grain of democracy, which disperses the power of political choice to voters. In the old days, political writers used to argue about the protection of minorities. How, they said, could minority groups in a democracy be protected against the majority? Surely the 51% might claim legitimacy for persecution of the 49%. But democracy is about more than majorities. It is about the right of every individual to freedom and justice, a right founded upon the Old and New Testaments, which remind us of the dignity of each individual, his right to choose, and his duty to serve. These rights are God-given and not state-given. They are rights which have been evolved and upheld across the centuries by our rule of law, a rule of law which safeguards individuals and minorities, a rule of law which is the cement of a free society. But what I think we are now seeing is the reverse problem, and we haven't properly faced up to it yet. The problem of the protection of the majority. Because there's come into existence a fashionable view, convenient to many special interest groups, that there's no need to accept the verdict of the majority, that the minority should be quite free to bully, even coerce, to get the verdict reversed. Marxists, of course, always had an excuse when they were outvoted. Their opponents, they said, must have false consciousness. Their views didn't really count. But the Marxists, as usual, provide only bogus intellectual top-dressing for groups who seek only their own self-interest. Plenty of groups operate more simply. They don't care whether they have persuaded their fellow citizens or not, or whether constitutionally elected governments undertake properly approved policies. These minorities will coerce the system to meet their own objectives if we let them get away with it. Many of the new campaigning pressure groups, run by professionals who move from campaign to campaign, some in the trade unions, some even in parts of the system of government itself, they have seen how our democracy has evolved rules to temper the power of the majority, and rightly so, and to provide safeguards and rights for the minority. They have spotted that if minorities bend the rules or simply ignore them, they may succeed in manipulating the whole system. The minority, indeed, may in the end effectively coerce the majority. You may recall that Burke had a phrase for it, as always. All that is needed for evil men to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Now, I hope I won't be thought too provocative if I complain again about the sloppy use of the word consensus in such cases. If there is a national debate and a constitutional vote about some matter, and if a recalcitrant minority says, the vote be damned, we're going to do our level best to stop the majority having its way, then, Mr. Chairman, it's no good saying we must seek consensus, we must negotiate, because such a group will never consent, whatever the majority thinks, until it gets what it wants. That is when we have to stand up and be counted. That is when we have to do what we believe to be right. We must never give in to the oldest and least democratic trick of all, the coercion of the many by the ruthless manipulating few. As soon as we surrender the basic rule which says that we must persuade our fellow citizens, not coerce them, then we have joined the ranks of the enemies of democracy. And now that democracy has been won, it is not heroic to flout the law of the land as if we still struggled in a quagmire where civilization had yet to be built. The concept of fair play, a British way of saying respect for the rules, must not be used to allow the minority to overbear the tolerant majority.